The terrifying mimics in Edge of Tomorrow are unique in sci-fi, and their memorable design took a lot of drafts and tinkering to perfect. In a parallel universe, the movie would have looked completely different. Thanks to some concept art designs made available by the artists who worked on Edge of Tomorrow, we know what the aliens might have looked like. The tentative designs were amazingly varied, and there were easily a few dozen completely different directions that the film could have gone.
I don't think I've ever really tackled something where there were no limitations at all. It's an alien.
Early in the process, the designs started out fairly normal, by alien standards anyway. Concept art from Christopher Brandstrom featured designs that were strikingly humanoid. They were much taller than a person and covered in crystalline skin, but they still looked more or less human. 2 legs, 2 arms, a torso, opposable thumbs, all the bells and whistles of fleshy earthlings. Different design iterations had varying levels of crystalline embellishment. While the timeline of the designs is unclear, we know that the move towards glass bodies was a very deliberate choice on the filmmaker's part, and one of the elements that carried over to the final design. Visual effects supervisor Daniel Kramer told FX Guide in 2014 that director Doug Liman wanted the aliens to have sharp bodies that didn't look too terrestrial, saying, "So we came up with obsidian as the material that it would look like, basically a glass that could cut." Interestingly, despite the human similarity of their general frame, these would-be mimics didn't have eyes or a mouth or facial features of any sort, which is pretty much the only way in which the finished film's aliens are more human-like than them. A major aspect of the aliens in Edge of Tomorrow, naturally, is that they had to be extremely intimidating, foes formidable enough to keep humanity in a state of near defeat, requiring some sort of workaround, like, say, a time loop.
Here they come, mean as hell and thick as grass.
Some of the earlier designs from sculptor and creature designer Ivan Manzella focused on the mimics' sheer physical presence, envisioning them as hulking beasts that dwarfed the soldiers. The drafts of that idea certainly make a strong impression. Compared to the humanoid concepts, these designs veer more alien, introducing an amorphous quality in addition to the size. Yet the idea to make the mimics conventionally big and solid was ultimately abandoned because the war effort against such creatures would ultimately have come down to brawn, which didn't really fit the concept of opponents too unpredictable to defeat with standard military firepower. If you squint, you can see the nucleus for what the mimics would become in Manzella's concepts, but there was such a wide variation even within those that it would still take a while to crystallize the final form. Another design concept Manzella showcased on his website was such a radical departure not only from the version we see in the movie, but from any other version that it bears a mention for its sheer uniqueness. It is unclear at what point Manzella came up with this particular design, but to look at it now is to see an open window into a completely different Edge of Tomorrow. Part squid and part magnified bacteriophage, it's arguably Manzella's most out-there design, but it's a testament to how different the mimics could have looked while still fulfilling Doug Liman's core vision of terrifying eldritch horrors. Edge of Tomorrow has plenty of science fiction elements, but it's mainly an action thriller. There's tension, sure, and some eerie moments, but nobody would call it a horror movie. Well, that might have been different if Aaron Sims' creative had a say in the creature design. In 2016, the company released some concept art for the film on Instagram, and it's safe to say that these concepts would have taken the movie in a completely different direction. The mimic design is a terrifying bipedal mass of flesh with one arm shaped into a blade and the other widening into a massive blunt object. Artwork showcasing a battle scene, meanwhile, introduced massive metallic spider-like designs towering over the soldiers. It's difficult to tell if these are vehicles or the creatures themselves, but they would have been terrifying when realized on the big screen either way. Throughout the production process, there were a lot of ideas that ultimately led to the mimic's final design, and we mean a lot.
We had 4,700 concept illustrations.
Artist Kelton Cram worked with Lyman early in the production and provided multiple reference illustrations. One particular piece of art rendered the mimics as an almost aquatic creature with translucent skin and a finned upper body. Another piece leaned into abstract forms with a molten exterior on a vaguely humanoid frame. Digital artist Darren Horley also offered several more humanoid designs. One element that carried over from that iteration was the shiny obsidian exterior. At some point during the design process, however, a decision was made to push the mimics towards a more radical level of bodily abstraction, and the designs began to resemble something closer to what showed up in the final film.
It's funny to say, but it's hard to design a good alien.
One of the clear elements that carried through several iterations of the final form was the tentacles. In the finished film, their design is so anatomically complex that it's impossible to take in all the details at first blush. They move so fast and with such unbound chaotic energy that it's sometimes hard to tell what part of them is moving.
You've got to have a big imagination so you can say, oh, camera pans up with the tentacles and then crashes down as it spears someone.
Concept pieces posted by Kevin Jenkins, who worked extensively on the production design, show the tentacles coming into their own on several iterations. The stockier build of this concept may well have informed the design of the larger alphas. These still aren't quite a one-to-one match to what we ended up seeing in the film, but it almost gets there. More than any other artwork, it combines the sense of total freedom with the size and proportions that make the aliens in the film so menacing. In the end, after numerous concepts, a finalized design started to coalesce. VFX house Frame Store shared some of the nearly finished concept art, and it's easy to see pieces of everything that came before. The obsidian skin, the sinuous build, and the flowing tentacles all owe their existence to previous iterations. Taken as a whole, the wide variety of concept art pieces show that the mission of designing the mimics was anything but simple. Every tiny element had multiple variations.
I mean, it's still a little too feline. Like this one at least feels a little more muscular.
But settling on a picture is one thing. Bringing it to life is something else entirely. The mimics' animation demands flowed directly from their role in the narrative. To fit the concept of Cage understanding their behavior only by going up against them again and again and again, the mimics needed to be, above all, unpredictable. That level of strangeness was achieved by making the mimics big masses of tentacles that moved individually, but still in sync with each other, a movement unlike that of any known terrestrial Earth animal. It was the best way the filmmakers found to make the aliens plausibly incomprehensible, so that Cage's efforts to gradually figure out their physicality would seem convincingly arduous. The movement of the mimics was largely inspired by a video from animation and visual design firm SR Partners, which Edge of Tomorrow VFX supervisor Jonathan Faulkner has identified as Resonance/Deus Ex Machina. Faulkner said that the video, with its rapidly expanding and pulsating prisms, quote, came to embody the random and terrifying kinetics of the mimics. As random and terrifying as the mimics needed to be, however, they couldn't be so bizarre as to completely defy human comprehension. There had to be something in their design to ground them, something for the brains of viewers to grasp onto. This very specific nuance, the need for the aliens to be as weird as possible yet just familiar enough to mesh together with the film's realistic action, informed the decision to bundle all the tentacles together into some kind of coherent and tight-knit body. Even more crucially, it informed the decision to give the aliens recognizable facial features, including eyes and a mouth. The ultimate design of the mimics was the result of a compromise between two narrative functions. Number one, they still needed to move in a realistic way that gave material weight to the battle sequences. It wouldn't work if they just looked like wads of spaghetti attacking everyone. And number two, they needed to be complex and alien enough to dumbfound Cage and the other soldiers.
Holy fuck!
Landing on such a complex model led to new problems, namely animating the things. One of the issues was the fact that it went against one of the basic tenets of CGI character animation, the central rigs, or articulated skeletons to which all of the characters' body parts and corresponding movements are tethered. A body made up of countless noodle-like limbs moving separately would require the creation of an exponentially large number of rigs replacing each other for every movement of every tentacle, a near-impossible animation challenge. To bundle the tentacles into a more cohesive bodily unit while also making them easier and less unruly to animate, VFX supervisor Daniel Kramer instructed a technical animator to devise a plugin. The idea was to position all the tentacles around a center curve. The plugin would link the tentacle's movement to the curve, thereby allowing it to guide all the tentacle's movement simultaneously.
We developed a procedural tentacle system to generate bundles of tentacles on the fly.
Kramer told Below the Line, I wanted 20 tentacles intertwined, twisted, contracted together, to writhe against each other. The plugin knew the radius of every tentacle. If one on the inside grew or slipped, the tentacles above it moved in reaction. The plugin gave the animators fine control over the mimic's movement, giving them the freakish range and unpredictability you see in the film. And thus, the mimics we know were born.
This is a perfectly evolved, world-conquering organism.